What's going on, everyone? Welcome back along to the channel. It is the final preview episode of the season. It's the big one. It is the final day, the grand final of Super Rugby. It is the Lions at home, defying all odds and defying all the idiots who thought they couldn't make it, up against the Crusaders, 7-time champions, going for number 8. The big question is, can they do it, or will the Lions remain victorious at home in the playoffs? That's what we're here to discuss. Once again, we've got 3 special guests lined up for you all to have their say on what they think is going to happen. So sit back, relax, enjoy the show. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. As per always, these are just our opinions, so let us know yours below in the comments. As always, links will be to these guys down in the description, so you can catch them and other places if you want to see what else these guys have going on. But let's crack into it. Let's see what everyone thinks is going to happen. Lions versus Crusaders Super Rugby Grand Final 2017. It's going to be a cracker. Let's meet the guests and see what they think. So our first guest we're welcoming back onto the channel, 3rd week in a row. You must get sick of him by now. It's the Scottish Cannon. Welcome back along to the channel again, 3rd time. I hope your weekend of rugby went well, and welcome back again.
Thank you very much. What a amazing weekend of semi-final rugby. Both games lived up to the hype, and man, we've got a cracking final. I can't wait for the for the weekend. It's going to be a cracking final.
And our second guest joining the channel for a look at the grand final is Paul, the man behind the Driving Maul. Hope you had a great weekend watching rugby. Welcome back along to the channel as well.
Thank you very much for having me. Yep, it was a good weekend of watching rugby. You're right. Got both games. One of them on delay, but got both games.
And finally, our last guest on the grand final preview show. It is the resident South African. It is Brett Hartley back on the channel. Thanks for joining me once again. How was your weekend of semi-final action?
Yeah, thanks for having me again, man. I'll admit to you, it landed up better than I thought it would be. Like during halftime of that Lions Hurricanes game, I thought my weekend was going to be pretty bad, but it turned out to be pretty good in the end. So yeah, very good rugby watching over the weekend.
So if you've been living under a rock, you don't know what's happened. Of course, we have the Lions will be hosting the Crusaders after the Crusaders defeat the Chiefs 27-13, and the Lions, well, could you say they blew away the Hurricanes 44-29 over in Johannesburg. So we're going to be having a look at those matches in the semi-finals. We're going to have a look at what we think is going to happen in the big one, the grand final. This is where it's all going to be decided. So let's kick things off with the semi-finals. Of course, the Chiefs going down to the Crusaders. A lot about this match. I thought the Chiefs were very poor with their finishing in that game, but off the field kind of thing for them, it's an end of an era, isn't it? There's a lot of players leaving, the likes of Cruden, the likes of Lowe, and many, many more as well. Huge effect on this team in the future. As for the Crusaders, their defence was just spectacular. They were clinical on all their chances. What were your thoughts on that semi-final?
It was a cracking game of rugby. I missed the first 20 or 30 minutes or so I'm not going to comment on the opening of the game. You can probably mention it, but man, that second half was cracking rugby. Just the game was flowing all over the place, end-to-end rugby, freakish tries, freakish defense. I mean, I don't know else what to say. It was just end-to-end absolute action, and it really lived up to the Kiwi derbies that we know, unlike last weekend.
Yeah, we talked about this. We did a live show straight after the game. But let's be honest, the Crusaders' defence was very good, and they were very clinical. They were in scoring points. Whenever they got into 22, they pretty much came away with points. I think it was like once or twice they didn't. Whereas the Chiefs tried to do lots of stuff, but seems to lack a couple of things to get through. I think we saw some of their inadequacies. So there's no big guy in that back line. So when there is just a wall of players, they just couldn't break the gain line, and it looked like they were afraid or didn't want to take on the Crusaders up front. And if you're not going to earn the space out wide, there's not going to be space out wide, especially against a team that's just not committing to the ruck. And they needed to do a bit more pick and go, suck some defenders in, and actually before trying to spread wide, but they just didn't do that.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. The Crusaders, I think the stat was towards the end of the first half, the Crusaders have been in the Chiefs 22 3 times, and they had 2 tries and a penalty from it. So it just shows that the Chiefs had most of the possession, most of the territory, but the Crusaders just took their chances, which the which the Chiefs failed to do. And then obviously the Crusaders got a bit lucky a couple of times. That try they scored from that ball that was tipped out of one of the Chiefs' hands. I can't remember which one it was, but Israel Dag scored that try. So a couple of lucky moments like that, but altogether it was a really good game. Crusaders put immense pressure on the Chiefs from the start, so the result wasn't really going to go any other way.
Second semi-final, of course, the Lions over the Hurricanes. This was
game of
one
the
of the
season.
best reasons to stay up till 3
Game
a.m. for
of
sure.
the season.
Yeah, hopefully you want to be bettered by the final as well. I mean, this was a game of two halves, wasn't it? We'll start with the Hurricanes.
Yeah.
Their flair in the first half. Their lack of, would you call it stamina or fitness, or just playing in the high belt in South Africa. You call it whatever you like. But the Hurricanes, they knew what they were getting themselves into this match, and they threw everything in the pan in that first half. And it almost come off as a perfect plan, but boy, those Lions, when that pack got going and when they really started to play like the Lions, they were a different team in the second half, weren't they?
Absolutely right. I was on Twitter all live tweeting it all, and I saw some New Zealand fans after 15 minutes, 22 points to 3. Get ready for the 18-minute performance. The Canes are going to put 60 on the Lions. Look at what happened. 44 points to 29. And man, I mean, the Lions steadied the ship. I mean, we had perfect predictions in this game, and we meant huge shout out to us last week. I don't want to toot our own horn, but we got the predictions absolutely right, and our what we said was the Lions' strengths and what they were going to do was absolutely phenomenal. In the first 15 minutes, the Lions were going for 50-meter drop goals. Why would you do that against the likes of the Kiwi opposition, Bolden Barrett, Geordie Barrett? Lou Mape, you don't give them the ball back like that easily. And finally, they kept it in the pack. They kept it tight. They started to get some forward momentum, started getting more penalties, and their driving more was fantastic. Their back play was fantastic. It was an absolute clinic from the Lions, and I absolutely loved watching them play it. That second half was absolutely phenomenal.
We had a quick chat just pre to this about about this game particularly, and I think the Canes just got over enthusiastic early on. They had a couple of early tries, and then I think a very inexperienced back line just try to overplay. If you look outside of TJ and Bolden Barrett, all those guys have got about 2 seasons experience at most. They're all really new at this level. And so I think that they just started to overplay their hand really, and then the Lions around about the half-hour mark, sort of after Ardy Surveyor's try, they kind of realised somebody on that pitch changed their game plan, which is you don't see many teams doing, and they started to pick and drive a lot more, and they and basically in the second half they just cut out their errors, and so there weren't the errors there for the Hurricanes to capitalise on, and obviously being a man down for 10 minutes didn't help either. Yeah,
I'd actually really like to see what Johan Ackerman said to Lions at halftime. I'd pay a lot of money to watch that, but it was the opposite of the way I expected it to be. I thought the Hurricanes would be really slow off the block and then ease their way into the game. I thought they'd be a bit more. I thought they'd have a better game plan and then go guns blazing from the start. And they got quite a big buffer on the Lions, but I think they forgot to take that altitude into account. And from someone who's been to Joburg quite a few times, just your chest really struggles as soon as you get into Joburg. The altitude and the smog, it's really difficult sporting conditions. So you could see the Hurricanes, who are one of the fittest teams in the whole competition, when they're huffing and puffing at the 50th minute, you know that they're in trouble because they haven't. Obviously, people always say that the Lions haven't played New Zealand teams, but New Zealand teams haven't gone to Joburg this year. They've been to Pretoria, I suppose, but you could see that they failed to plan that and they factored that into their game. They spent the energy, they peaked too early, and obviously when you peak too early, you drop very quickly. So very, very good performance from the Lions in the second half. They had a really good attack. Their forwards in particular really stood out. They had a really good driving maul and just put constant pressure on the Hurricanes, and the Hurricanes just folded.
And like it was spoken a lot about on Twitter and things like that, a certain number 10 will be speaking about later on with these guys as well. So keep sticking around for that. First things first about this grand final. Going into this, there was a lot of talk, and what surprised me after last night's game, those two semi-finals, was who actually was the favourites for especially that Lions-Hurricanes match. When we've seen the bookies in Australia, you were saying, South Africa, in New Zealand as well, everyone had the Hurricanes as favourites, which really shocked me. I thought Lions all day long should be favourites in my books, and ever since they topped the group, topped the table I should say, they were my favourites all along. So that surprised me. So going into this, who is your favourite? Who do you think the bookies should be putting down as the favourites, and why?
What for the? I mean, it was the Lions. I think everyone on your preview said the Lions were going to win, but it was $1.80 or something to the Hurricanes, which made no sense to me. I mean, I guess it was on the back of the Lions' shaky performance against the Sharks, barely getting over the line with the 58-meter penalty from the sideline to win it, to the Hurricanes having a relatively easy road in, beating the Brumbies, no problem, beating the Crusaders the week before that. I mean, to be fair, based on the form of the two sides coming in, it does reflect the bookies' decision to have the Canes as favourites. But man, the Lions are always going to win that game at home, at altitude as well. I mean, I just didn't see how the Lions were not going to win that game. The only game they had lost this season was when they rested a ton of players when they went to Argentina. It made no sense to me, and I should have put money on because I would have doubled my money.
Yeah, easily. So who goes into the final as your favourite? If you're baking the books,
I would have Lions slight favourites. Maybe $1.85 to $1.95. It is so hard to split them, and I can't wait until we get into that discussion. But it's going to be an absolutely intense final. Will that home ground advantage be the difference between the Lions and the Crusaders, with hopefully a packed out Johannesburg Stadium? 60,000 people there. That would be absolutely amazing. But don't take the record for a Super Rugby final off the Sydney and New South Welshman. I was in that crowd, and we set quite a big benchmark. So I don't want you to break that. But yeah.
I back the Lions by 7 going to this one. So I don't know odds. I'm not a gambling kind of guy, so I can't sort of give you odds and stuff. But to me, yeah, the Lions were favourites going into this game, and so I backed them by about 7 points. Obviously, it was more than that in the end. But I'm known as being a conservative with my gaps. So 7 generally, if you're interpreting that, that's a probable win. If I go above 7, then it's kind of like a definite win. If I go below, it's kind of like a bit marginal. So yeah, it was always a probable win to the Lions.
Were you surprised that all three sort of countries had the Hurricanes as favourites heading into that match?
Let's be honest, the TAB follows the money. All the TAB people might think it's a dead cert Lions win. If all the money goes on the Hurricanes, they're going to change their odds so that they don't lose whoever wins. So they just follow the money. And let's be honest, Green Gold podcast, myself, quite a few of us said, when it comes to playing prediction leagues and doing predictions, if a Kiwi side is playing somebody else, back the Kiwi side. And you're going to do pretty well in your prediction league. So, yeah, I think too many people took that on board and forgot who they were really playing.
I mean, it's quite obvious, well, to me at least. It's always got to be the home team, and throughout Super Rugby, we've seen that the home team has a very distinct advantage. I don't think many away teams have actually won a Super Rugby final, especially not teams traveling internationally. Yeah, obviously, there's a history of local away teams, so meaning New Zealand teams winning other parts of New Zealand or something like that, but for a team to go internationally and try to win a Super Rugby title, that's a very tough ask, no matter who the team is. So, if I was a bookie, I'll definitely put in the Lions as a favourite, because travelling to Joburg and playing a game of rugby after being in New Zealand the week before, not easy at all. So I would say the Lions are definitely the favourites.
So we're just reading before this about how the Crusaders are all boarding their flight with a full squad of fit players ready to go. Lions would probably expect the same thing to be going their way. So do you expect either of the sides to make two or any changes to their squad or the way they're playing, but mostly to their squad given the opposition they're coming up against, now that the Lions have finally got over this rubbish throughout the last 2 weeks about how they haven't played a New Zealand team and all that sort of crap? Well, that should all be put together. If you're a silly clown out there who's still saying that, then get your head checked, because you're on something pretty powerful. expecting anything to change here? Is it going to be same 23s for the two sides?
Oh, it's got to be. I mean, you don't change what ain't fixed. Both sides, 14-1 win records coming into the finals. In New Zealand, the Crusaders beating 2 Kiwi sides to make the final. The Lions getting over the Sharks, and then the Hurricanes. I mean, both sides going with some great form, unless there's some injuries midweek or Kieran Reid doesn't get over his knee injury, which I'm sure he will. There's not going to be too many changes because both packs seem to look very, very strong.
I think with the Crusaders, I think that they're pretty much, that's their first choice, isn't it? I don't think there's anyone kind of out missing or coming back. For the Lions, maybe Van Regensburg. He's someone that I like seeing on the pitch, who didn't start at the weekend. But apart from that, I think I can't see many changes across that side.
Any changes to the way the teams are going to play, given what they've learned with the Hurricanes match, swinging both ways with what the Lions got from that first half of the way the Hurricanes team plays, vice versa for the way the Lions come back in the second half for the Crusaders?
Well, I think the Lions are going to pick and go. They have, and because if we look at how the Crusaders defended against the Chiefs, they weren't committing anyone to that breakdown, and so there was normally 14 guys stood up in a nice line to tackle you, obviously with a sweeper and blah blah blah. But basically, there was only the tackler in the rug. There was no one else. So I think you're going to see the Lions are going to go one out or pick and goes to try and suck a few players in first, because otherwise there's just no space. So there's no point trying to spread the ball wide unless you can have someone do something miraculous. You're not going to break that line.
Yeah, look, I think they'll stick with with pretty much the squad they have right now. The squad they fielded on Saturday. My knowledge of their bench is not as great as my knowledge on other teams' benches, but especially in terms of their starting 15, I don't really see anywhere that they could improve. Their back three especially has been amazing. Having Tamani Valu in one wing and Israel Dag on the other wing is really, really dangerous. And I don't see them making any improvements. They had a really good game, really great performance against the Chiefs, especially considering the conditions they were playing in. So, no, I don't really see them making any changes.
Do you think there's any chance of Rohan James van Rensburg getting a start off the bench for the Lions?
Yeah, there might be. He's just, obviously, last night was his first game back from injury, so the Lions have a tough one because the guy who got called up to replace him, he's had a great season since he replaced him, good old Foster. So, I think both of them can even be considered for Springbok selection. Foster's played that well and really filled his shoes. If I was the Lions, I'd keep Foster at 12. He's proven that he can perform really well. He played well last night as well. So I think I'll keep him starting, and then I'll bring Janssen Ferenzberg from the bench as a huge impact player that you can bring on the last 20-25 minutes to really make a huge impact on the game. The battle
of the forward pack. Now, I've narrowed this down to one area specifically. I think is going to be a big battle between these two sides. The back row. Now you've got the Lions back row, who I think were just amazing, and they really lead the way. All three. Quagga Smith. If anyone's been around the channel for a while, you know Quagga Smith is a hero of Nathan Nicholls' Bear Pro season with the Lions in the Curry Cup. You know what I'm talking about. Other sides of that, though, they got Ackerman has been amazing as well. He's been simply superb. But they're coming up on the other side against the likes of a Taufua, Todd, and Reid for the Crusaders. I think this is where one of the first areas where the game could be won or lost. Do you think either side's got an advantage here? Two very, very good back rows. Who's going to nick this one?
I think they're slightly different packs, though, as well. And I know Hypersports on Twitter, he keeps going on about how good Matt Todd is. And he's not that Richie McCaw-like flanker to actually crack it into the All Blacks. I think he's quite underrated, Matt Todd, as well. He had a men's game against the Chiefs on the weekend, and he'll be phenomenal. But Quagga Smith, I know him mostly from the 7th Circuit, and he was amazing for the Blitzbucker in the 7th Circuit. And he's an all-round flanker. He's got the speed of a back, but he's got the work-hat horse mentality of Arnie Salvia. So he's an all-round player, Quagga Smith, and he's still going to get better and better. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting, the over the ball with the Lions probably having the edge there. But, man, it should be a cracking back row affair.
And Brennan's also always important with those guys. I think the line out could be important. We saw the Lions make really disrupt the Hurricanes line out. And that's how it felt like to me. Just a quick check on the stats on here. It looks like, well, they claim that actually that the Hurricanes won 12 out of their 14 lineouts. It didn't feel like that during the game, though. It felt like they didn't want to go to the lineout because you could see it was getting disrupted and they weren't getting the ball. So I think the lineout will be an important battle. My guess is that at scrum time they'll probably be fairly even, and then the whole breakdown will come down to how many players are each side trying to commit to it. Will one of them try and sort of pull a fast one and go, right guys, we're going to commit 2 or 3 players to every single breakdown, and let's see if we can just ruck them off the ball defensively, because they're not going to expect anyone to be there. And that could be one option, is to totally flip the whole thing, and where they're expecting there to be no one in there, and just to blitz it. Could be one way, but it's unlikely.
Yeah, 100%. Seeing guys like Kieran Reid, battling against guys like Quagga Smith, that's really what you want in the Super Rugby final, and that's going to be a huge part of this game. The forward battle, I think, is actually going to decide the game. Both sets of teams have really good backs, but I think the grunt of the match, whoever decides the match, is going to be who can get the advantage in the forwards. That's how the Crusaders won last week, and the Lions forwards also were immense last night, and scored a lot of their points as well. So both sets of forwards can run with it, can pass it really well. So seeing those 2 sets of forwards go head to head is going to be a really good mouth-watering matchup for me, at least.
Indeed, it should be. Now, we move out to the backline. An area I think I've targeted here is the battle between the 2 number 10s. Now, I think this is going to be a very, very, very different battle from what we've seen in the semi-finals just gone by, especially with the Lions and the way they were against the Hurricanes with the Bowden Barrett situation, and Geordie Barrett for that matter as well. I think it's going to be a very different situation for the Crusaders with the likes of a Richie Mo'unga. Do you see the Lions are going to target him as much? Because I don't think he is an influential player as a Bowden Barrett is. The Crusaders should adapt. How do you see this battle going? And a lot of talk about Elton Yankees as well over the week. Did you think he lifted to the next level in that semi-final? Do you think he kind of dispelled all those rumours and talks about him being not a big game player?
Well, I mean, I was the only one, I think, out of the 3 that, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I protected Yankees. I said that was absolutely rubbish, because I know Driving Maul said he's not a big game player. And look what happened. He had a great game against the Hurricanes. And I mean, it's interesting. Will he falter like he did in last year's final? I don't know. It's hard to say. It's against a different opposition with the Crusaders. Obviously, they don't have the firepower of a Bowden Barrett at 10, but they completely strangled the life out of the Barrett brothers, the Lions. It'll be interesting because it's a different combination. 10-12 of Mo'unga and Ryan Crotty is slightly different than a 10-12 combination of Bowden Barrett and Lou Mape. So I'm very interested to see. Ryan Crotty is not as ball powerful as Lou Mape is. So it'll be a very different challenge for the Lions. I'm not really sure, but I think Elton Yankees, he needs to stay out of his head. And if he's firing, the Lions are going to fire.
I think it was a good team performance. I think if any player likes to have a platform that's moving forwards, and that's what his forwards gave him when they started to play it short. So it wasn't suddenly him pulling the strings and kicking it into. If anyone was improving the kicking was Combrink, who I thought had a really good game out on the wing. His kicking was fantastic. So. I think it was a platform he was given rather than him sort of stepping up and bossing a game in the way that you kind of remember players like Dan Carter and stuff to do when they decided that this is their game and everyone else is just going to be their puppets. No, he didn't do that for me. He kept his composure on the whole, but I think it was down to the platform.
First, in my opinion on Yankees, I think my perspective. Obviously, I blasted him quite a bit last week, but. My perspective on him my opinion on him hasn't really changed, or it's shifted. It hasn't turned 180 at all. But it's the first big game I've seen him show up in. He had his first half was really shocking. He had a really few, like, it's in particular some of his passes that were intercepted were atrocious passes, but I can really see he was a different player at halftime. His kicking was obviously loads better than it was against the Sharks. So in the second half, he was a different player to who he was in the first half. He was really composed in the second half, and to have a composed 10 in really tight situations, and especially in situations where you need to come back in in a big while you're trailing by a lot, to have a composed fly half like him is amazing. And yeah, the Crusaders not relying on Mo'unga as much as the Hurricanes rely on Barrett. It makes it a lot harder to defend because if your team's really 10 dominated, you can really focus on a 10. If it's the pivot of if it's the central point of all your attack, you only need to attack the one spot. I think the Crusaders' threats, they need to focus more out wide and really mark up Tamani Vailu and Israel Dag as well. So I think their defense especially will be focused out wide, because I feel like against the Chiefs, the Crusaders really, utilized those wings and got big meter gains from both of them. So I think that's where their defense will be focused mainly.
Yeah, he's a crucial part of their whole backline operating very, very well. The rest of the team, there's any players specifically or areas you think that one team is going to dominate another that will be a key part of the match?
Well, like last week I said, I predicted it was the driving maul. The Lions driving maul last night was phenomenal. Absolutely destroyed the Hurricanes to shreds, and that scrum destroyed the Hurricanes to shreds. Coming up against the likes of a All Black front row, though, it's maybe a slightly different story. But I mean, the way that the Lions had that driving maul on a string, and the Hurricanes just couldn't do anything about it. I still do not know why more teams don't sack a maul before it forms. You saw the Lions do it in that match against the Hurricanes. The Hurricanes went for a driving maul, but was sacked immediately, and they had to use it from the back. And that ended up not being a try to the Hurricanes, if I can remember rightly. I think it ended up being a knock-on or something. I could be wrong on that, but it's such a tactic that if I was Razor Robinson, would be something that I really focus on, is sacking that maul before it forms.
Well, I mean, Tamani Vailu had a good game, didn't he, for the Crusaders, and Combrink did also for the Lions. So the wingers could step in and do something there. Crotty is obviously a name that we sort of normally think of as being sort of an organizer and stuff, but maybe it's his turn to shine in one of these kind of events. He could be from the back line. I mean, obviously we've also got players like Dag and stuff who always are magic. But it's going to be which of those packs gives the better platform for their team, and I think we're going to see a bit of a battle there first. And I wouldn't be surprised if, unlike some of these other games that have been a bit loose, as people find their feet in the first 10 or 15 minutes, if this one isn't, if both sides don't decide, you know what, the place to win this is up front, let's really try and bash it in that first 10 or 15 rather than play all this fast, loose stuff and try and get a couple of tries early doors. So I think it's going to be the combination of that front of that pack that's going to be more important than necessarily an individual.
I think the other one is just mindset of the two teams. Last year when the Lions were going to the final, they were celebrating after they won the semi-final that they won the championship, and I think that's just that was inexperience showing. Last night, I think a lot of their celebration was how relieved they were that they were able to come, muss up that comeback. So I think the Lions definitely have a better mindset, and the Crusaders, obviously, a lot of them have been there, done that. So I think they'll have a really good mindset as well. So depending on, it's going to be a physical battle as well as a mental battle as well. So which team can get the upper hand mentally on the other is going to be a huge decider for this game.
Faf de Klerk is the ultimate little cheerleader on the sideline. He was jumping around like a little crazy man during that game. He's like so similar to Aaron Smith, I find him. Those two guys are like a carbon copy of each other in their attitude of things. So on to more not on the field sort of things around this matchup. The travel. This is always going to be a big topic when teams are going to and from South Africa. But looking back at how the Crusaders have travelled this season, they played only the Cheetahs and the Bulls, which you could argue are not the toughest opposition to come up against, but considering the scorelines, 48-21 over the Cheetahs and 62-24 over the Bulls, they were thrashings. Do you think the Crusaders are a team that can travel to South Africa and actually deal with the conditions a bit more than Hurricanes or Highlanders and other teams from New Zealand and Australia for that matter?
I honestly, I don't think it will really faze them. But I mean, the Crusaders playing in that bogfest against the Highlanders, they reacted perfectly well, and they showed you they can play running rugby as well when they beat the Chiefs. But to be honest, the Chiefs obviously were very, very tired. Going over and beating the Stormers and then coming back to New Zealand was, always going to be difficult for them. Good thing about them for the Crusaders, obviously, is they had 2 games in New Zealand at home, and they only have 1 flight to go. They've had no travel really in the lead up. They've been in New Zealand for the most part, and they've only got 1 flight to go over. The conditions should be fine. But obviously at altitude is again a different story. Being 1,500 meters above sea level, the ball travels much longer in the air, and you'll see the Lions go for many drop goals and many long penalty goals in this final game, because it is a final. They won't be going for the corner much. They'll be trying to get as many points as possible, unless it's desperate rugby, which they had to play against the Hurricanes after being 19 points down.
Not from playing the Cheetahs and the Bulls, no. I got to see the Bulls in the flesh against the Blues, and they were awful. They were just so limited, it wasn't true. So no, I don't think we can read anything into that. I think all the New Zealand sides are decent travellers. To me, it wasn't the travel that lost this game for the Hurricanes. I think it was the Lions changing it up, and also their over exuberance and the youthfulness in the back, the lack of experience, saw them trying to overplay. I think to me that's where they lost this game. So I don't think it was the travel. Again, the Chiefs had a decent game against the Crusaders, but they lacked the things you needed to beat the Crusaders. You have to take them on up front. You can't just let them fan out on the defence. You have to have, or if you are going to do that, you let them fan out, you're going to have someone who's a powerful runner to break that gain line. And you can't always do it with magic. You sometimes need a bit of biff to go with it. And so I don't think travel was the key issue this weekend, even though we talk about it a lot. And also, another thing that people have been saying is that it's not the first trip that hurts, it's the second trip that hurts. The Crusaders have had a few weeks at home now where they've not had to travel. So it's not like they're tired going into this trip. They're fresh going into this trip, relatively speaking. The thing that might hurt them is the weather change. They're going from somewhere that's been extremely wet and cold to somewhere that's going to be nice and warm and dry, by the looks of things from the TV. So that could be the big thing, is the condition flip rather than the actual travel, and them having to change their play according to those conditions. Yeah,
I think most New Zealand teams travel well, but from what I've seen for the Crusaders over the last few years, they do travel quite well, especially to South Africa. They don't really seem to be too intimidated by going to South Africa. Like you said, they played well against the Bulls, and Pretoria's extremely close to Joburg as well. So they've had some experience this year of playing at altitude, playing in the high veld. But they do travel well. But saying that, the pressure of a Super Rugby final, and thinking about that over a very, very long plane ride to South Africa, that definitely factors into the mental and physical fatigue. And obviously you want to train harder during the week before a final. It just depends what mindset they go into with it. If they, as hard as it sounds, if they go into the week like it's just another tour to South Africa. They're not playing a final on the weekend, and they train as they normally would before a tour game. I think they'll do really well. But if they overdo it in training, training at altitude's quite difficult. But they'll be prepared for that. So I think that travel will play a factor in the game, but I don't think it will have a huge impact on the overall result.
Yeah, that's true. It's easy to forget that it is actually the big one. It's the final. It is the final game of the season. It all lies on this. It's like another week of Super Rugby, but this is it. Finally, though, on this match, before we have a look at who we think is going to win it, the uncontrollables. Now, this is your expert area of the field. We've already talked a little about the weather. We're expecting, like it was the last 2 weeks in Africa, that it should be fairly fine, fairly sunny, fairly dry underfoot. But the other point you've mentioned a little bit as well about playing on the hide belt and that sort of condition. But the big one that I'm looking at you for is the referee.
Yeah.
Who do you think it's going to be, and is he going to impact this game in a way we want, or is he going to let it flow like we've seen from Glenn Jackson in that Crusaders Chiefs game, which I thought was a brutal game, but it was an open, free-flowing game, and it was like rugby should be.
Well, Sansa are actually giving me a call, and I'm actually doing the final, so I'm just letting you know that.
Oh, we're all screwed. We're screwed.
No, I'm kidding. It'll be interesting because Glenn Jackson, Jakob Piper, I thought both had decent games. It's hard to separate them because I'm not a referee coach, I'm a referee. I don't know the intrinsics, the small little details. If it's one decision, that could be the difference between them getting the final or not. There's also an interesting point to talk about is, will it actually be Angus Gardner? Will it be the Australian referee, so they have an impartial referee between the obviously the South Africa and New Zealand final? Will they bring an Australian referee in to make it impartial? I don't think so. I think the best ref the entire season will get the final. And to be honest, that would probably be Jakob Piper. It's hard to say. It's really hard to say. Either Jakob Piper or Glenn Jackson will get the final. I can't remember who did the final last year. Was it Glenn Jackson last year? And I think Jakob maybe had it the year before, or vice versa. I think they've both done Super Rugby finals. But either way, I think they will get the job done. I just hope the game is not decided on a 50-50 contentious referee call. That's the most important thing, I think.
Yep, well, 100% agree with you on that. Yeah, that would be just terrible. That's what I liked about that Glenn Jackson refereed match between the Crusaders and the Chiefs. It was open. It wasn't like playing tiddlywinks. There wasn't silly penalties. There wasn't those things that you just say, it's a game of rugby, let's move on, and things like that. But if it was Gardner, it's probably the only way an Australian player is going to get to the grand final, eh?
Oh, definitely. I don't think it will be Gardner based on his quarterfinal. But you can definitely, obviously, there's in that impartialness. It depends if Sansa are going to go along that route or not. I know it would be definitely something that the New Zealand media will cook up if it's Jakob Piper in the final, because I like South African bias. But yeah, no, that you cannot blame. I saw some people on Twitter and Facebook blaming the ref for the Hurricanes losing. Are you kidding me? You're ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. You lost fair and square. The Lions were too good. Move on. Yep,
I completely agree with you on that. Yeah, there's a lot of shall we say salty comments. Yes, there was a bit going on, and that's good. I think, although it's a bit silly, it's good because that just shows you how close this actually is. If people weren't concerned about the Lions and the possibilities that they'll actually win, and talking New Zealand rugby fans, Crusaders fans, they wouldn't be this uptight about it. They wouldn't be this aggro about it. So it's good for the competition because people actually do realise that these Lions are a threat to the competition as well.
Absolutely right. That talk pre-week last week, the Lions haven't played a New Zealand team. Well, no New Zealand team played the Lions. Look what bloody happened.
Yep. An amazing display in the second half. It was a classic Lions performance.
I haven't got a clue. I want to touch on the altitude thing first and the Highfield thing, because I think we saw Bowden Barrett put one out on the full from a restart on the full. And there were a couple of kicks I thought, oh, if you leave that, that's going to go dead. And the players didn't risk it. So I think, that length of kick, that kicking game, is going to be interesting in how well the Crusaders adapt to the fact the ball just flies further than they're expecting. And are they actually positioning themselves too short and getting the ball kicked over their heads might be interesting as well. So that is going to be interesting as how they kind of intuitively adapt to the length of kicking. For the ref, I haven't got a clue who it's going to be, to be honest. I think both refs had decent games. Apart, I guess there are two little pleasers. In the Crusaders Crusaders win, there was that Chiefs try that got disallowed by the TMO, which that was a bit of a harsh knock on, and I think that could easily have gone either way. And then also in the Lions Hurricanes game, I think Bowden Barrett's yellow card was tough. It was definitely a penalty, but to card him for it, I think it was over the top. So apart from those two incidents, I don't think either of the refs really had a big impact on the game. They kept themselves out of it. They punished what needed to be punished, and weren't overly finicky. So as long as as long as it gets refereed like the semi-finals did, then we should all be happy.
Okay, yeah. So weather, I think, will favour the Lions. New Zealand, obviously, the Crusaders would have been playing wet conditions for the last couple of weeks. It's the pitch in Joburg right now looks about as dry and as good as a running pitch as you can get. So I don't know what the weather for in Joburg's looking like this week, but I think it's going to be pretty much the same. Joburg's cold, but it's not obviously not near as wet as New Zealand gets. But the weather definitely favours the Lions. But it's not like the Crusaders can't play a running game. I think the Crusaders can adapt to most conditions. And last week we've seen them implement a more kicking game in the wet conditions, and the week before as well. They might adapt to a running game, or because it's a final, they might keep with a kicking game and make the Lions adjust. The ref, I don't know what is happening with the refs lately. How can you get a South African ref to ref a South Africa versus New Zealand game? Or I think last week versus the Sharks with the Lions, the ref that was ref in the game, I think is from Johannesburg. So I don't know how that quite works. I don't know. I thought you had to get a neutral ref. That was my interpretation of the whole reffing thing. So surely either get an Australian ref, someone like Angus Gardner, who's really the only Australian ref that might be able to handle himself in a Super Rugby final, or you go up north and get someone like Nigel Owens to ref, who has no ties at all to any Super Rugby team. Not that that Jaco Piper was bad at all, in my opinion. Obviously, I'm biased being a South African, but I don't think he was that bad. Last night, a lot of Crusaders fans would disagree with me. I think the only really shocker Piper had last night was the yellow card of Bowden Barrett. I think it was a penalty, but I don't think it was a yellow card. So, the Piper wasn't too bad. He's not often very biased to any team. But yeah, I think they need to get a neutral ref, either Angus Gardner or someone like Nigel Owens, just not a French ref, please.
So that is it. We've had a bit of a look at what we think is going to happen. On the end of the day, you predicted this final would come about, so you got there in the end. Although you picked the Highlanders, you got there in the end of the final two teams. Who's going to win it? What's your margin? Big call.
Lions by 1 point. I think I want the Lions to win. I've got to say, I don't want a Kiwi team to win again. Have the Lions won? I don't think the Lions have won a Super Rugby title, have they?
No.
Well, it would be their main one. So instead of actually the Crusaders being the more successful Super Rugby team of all time, let's have a new breed of talent to come through, because the Lions have been the most consistent side over the last 2 years, and they deserve to win it, in my opinion.
And it would finish off the story, the fairy tale, beautifully, wouldn't it? Of the team that got kicked out in the early 2010s, somewhere there, had to fight with the Kings, getting promotion, relegation, all that sort of rubbish, and Johan Ackerman going to Gloucester as well. It's all set up for a fairy tale ending, isn't it? Yeah, very much so. Yeah, it's the perfect finish to it all, and it's what the Cheetahs could have been in 3 or 4 years' time.
Oh no, they couldn't.
Maybe the Curry Cup champions.
Maybe the Kings.
The Kings. The Kings must be Pro 14 champions instead. It'll happen. It'll happen indeed. So you're going with the Lions. Lions by 1.
1.
Is that your margin? That's a pretty close one.
I want it to be a close one. It's not exciting if it's a 20-point drubbing, is it?
How many yellow cards?
There'll be 1.
One yellow card.
For a lifting tackle by Kieran Reid.
Oh no. That'll decide the match ultimately in the end.
Lions by 7.
By 7. He's gone out quite. It's big. It's the final. It's a grand final. It's come around so quickly, and you're going big margin like 7. What's your reasons? What's your changing, defining factor?
I think it's the Lions. They're at home, so there's home advantage there. They're in a final last year, so they know kind of what it's all about, and they're building up towards it. It's Ackerman's last game with them, so there's also there's an emotional piece of doing it for the coach. So I think there's a lot of things there that are all just sort of kind of coming nicely for the Lions. For the Crusaders, it's a new coach. Is he going to get it right? Maybe he does get everything right, but he's done it with the under-20s going to finals and stuff. But this is going to be a bit different. So has he engineered everything right for the Crusaders? They're away from home, so there's a few little things like that. It's been a while since they've been in a final, hasn't it? So they just don't have. So they've not got the same experience of being in finals as well. So I just think there's all the pointers are towards the Lions, but I'm not expecting a breakaway or a big victory. I think it's still going to be within about a score.
Okay, so I've gone Lions by 5 is my margin. I would say that primarily for a lot of the reasons I've said, stuff like travel, home ground advantage is huge. I'm praying that Ellis Park will be packed because the crowd has been absolutely shocking the last 2 games. No, they did get 30,000 there last night, but that's, in terms of what Ellis Park can hold, that's a pretty shocking crowd. So I'm hoping there'll be a sold-out crowd, and I'm expecting it to be, being a Super Rugby final. I actually know a lot of South Africans that live in Australia have already booked their flights to Joburg for next week. So you have that factor. So that'll be really good to have a nice full Ellis Park. Not a very great place to play if you're the away team. And Lions fans could get really crazy as well. So that should be a great atmosphere if they really pack it up to the rafters. And also, if the Lions improve defensively, which is something they really need to do, their defense has been really bad over the last 2 weeks, especially. And if they chase up their kicks, which the Crusaders do really well, if the Lions can chase up their kicks, put pressure on the Crusaders, and just nullify that counter attack, which is what the Crusaders do very, very well. It's very hard to counter attack against the Crusaders. If they can sort out their defense and their kick chasers, I think they're definitely the hot favourites. So yeah, that's why I've gone Lions by 5, but very close game.
All right, that is it. That is the thoughts of the Cannon on the Super Rugby Grand Final. It's been great having you on for these 3 weeks. It's been awesome having your views consistently throughout. If you've liked what the Cannons had to say over the whole series, give the video a thumbs up. Let us know your thoughts, of course, in the comments below. Any final plugs you'd like to give to yourself?
No.
Or your thoughts on this big grand final?
No, I think we're all good. We've done more than enough collabs together, so I'm sure your subscribers know who I am and vice versa.
Indeed. All links will be left in the description below. But until next time, thanks for joining me, and we'll see you all for our next little meeting together. See ya.
All right.
Good about just one little thing. You're right. It's kind of the Lions have built up this crescendo, haven't they? And it does feel like this is it for them. And if they don't do it this year, next year's going to be much tougher for them, having lost their head coach and stuff. So this does feel like it has to be now. So there is that extra pressure on them from that point of view.
Yeah, definitely agree with you there.
So a place you can find me, obviously, at Driving Maul on Twitter, also at the Driving Maul channel on YouTube. Cornflake and I have been doing a whole bunch of stuff on my channel as well. There's a Hash Rugby chat every Tuesday at 8 PM live, and we've also been doing post-game live reactions. Let's see if we can try and do one for the final as well.
Good luck with that. Good luck with that. That'll be another 3 AM-er, I'm sure. That is it. Thank you all for joining me for this, and thanks to Driving Maul for coming on the channel. And we'll see him hopefully very soon for more rugby action. Until then, though, thank you and goodbye.
Good night.
Yeah, so I'm pretty much, as you can see, I'm very patriotic right now. When every South African team that's not the Bulls gets in the final, I'm very patriotic. Sorry, Bulls. And my Twitter, Cornflake will link it down below. And I invite any Crusaders fans to, come at me, I guess. Not really. I invite any Crusaders fans to voice your opinions towards me. I've already got a couple on both Twitter and Facebook. So, if you want to have some banter, some friendly banter at that, feel free to get me there. But I look forward to it.
So, tell me, who would you be supporting if it was Crusaders versus Bulls?
I think I'll support the Crusaders.
Oh, no!
I don't know. It will be difficult. I really don't like the Bulls, and a really good friend of mine's a Bull supporter, so I'll never hear the end of it if they beat the Crusaders in the final. But, yeah, it will be a tough situation. It will be I know a no-winning scenario final.
Oh, that's awesome. That is it. That is us done, though, for the big grand final preview coming up this weekend, of course, in Johannesburg, South Africa. Lions versus Crusaders. Thanks, Brent, for joining me, and thanks for joining me over the last 3 weeks as well. Your thoughts and input have been amazing, and I think everyone's enjoyed having lots of different thoughts on the channel as well. So hopefully we'll see you again soon with some more thoughts from you as well. But thank you, and we'll see you all very soon. See ya. Okay, so that's what everyone thinks is going to happen. But of course, like we've been doing all season long, the SuperBru picks are still going for one final round. This is crucial points that could decide places in the league. But it doesn't look like it's going to decide too much at the top, with surprising change last week has seen Devon take the lead and take his lead up to almost 2 points over Caleb 42N, who's led for so long but has fallen at the final hurdle, which is quite remarkable what has gone on here. Winard still sits third after another good round of picks, but he's only 0.08 above Waggers in fourth. Through the guests on the channel this weekend as well, we've got the Driving Mall, who still sits there in 8th spot, so he's still having a pretty good pick as well. He looks steady in there, possibly could jump up 1 or 2 spots if he has a good weekend in the picking the final and the others don't. But ultimately, I think he's going to stay about there, because most people are going to pick pretty average, I'd think, 50-50. The points are on offer for 2 points, if you get it right. So we could see some changes. On the other side's doing, we've got Assassin's Attack, who picked up the yellow cap. He moved up a couple of spots, and we can see, look at this, down in 18th. Yes, that is right. Yours truly making the big lunge up the leaderboard. We're giving Wakasadua the wooden spoon in the process. And I'm up 4 inside the top 20. How about that? That is amazing. I'm doing better than I thought. If I was getting around the 20 mark, I was happy. But to be inside the 20s, I am more than happy with how the season has gone. Further down, Brett Hartley, he's sitting mid-20s. He's in 25th. Strong finish from him as well has seen him climb up in the last couple of weeks. But someone who's not doing any climbing as we go further on down is the Scottish Cannon. Terrible picks from him recently. Down another spot and into 33rd. Just like Australian rugby, the Cannon is going down the toilet with his countrymen. So that is where we stand with 1 game to go. A couple of points on offer at best. Devon looks odds on to shut this one out. Can Caleb stop him? Find out in the final look, which will be after this weekend of the SuperBru picks. Of course, we've got the fantasy teams to go as well. We'll see how that leaderboard looks and if there's any chance of an upset at the top of that table. Unsurprisingly, there's little change on the fantasy team, with MF CFO's Blue still sitting comfortably at the top. A big lead, still sitting around 70 points as well. The awesome Transgender Sloth sitting in second, with Solar Eclipses keeping that top 3 nice and steady. Dream Team 15 makes a big lunge up the leaderboard, with the Penny Thou Thumbother going down a spot, with Dix out up 3 spots with the yellow cap, covering up what everyone should not want to see. Further on down the leaderboard, where's our first look of anyone's teams? I know my team, here we go. The All Flakes moving down a couple of spots, but still in that mid-20s, which I'm not too upset about. It's been a long season of fantasy team. It's hard to keep up with all the changes, injuries, and all that going on. But there's one important thing that has happened here. We're beating these idiots, and that is the main goal of all these leagues, to beat them. So we're sitting 10 spots or so above 8 if you want to be particular about it. But looks at that wrapped up over the Cannon as well. But at the top of the leaderboard, it looks like it's going to be the Blues all the way. Something the Blues might win. Up Blues team doing them proud. Right, so we got the final to go. I've spoken a bit about what I think is going to happen throughout the chat with the guests as well. But let's wrap it up. I'll make my pick here on SuperBru so you can all copy if you like, or go the opposite for that chance to be the difference maker. Let's have a look at the big one, the grand final. So firstly, before I talk about the actual final itself, I just want to say a big farewell to some of the Chiefs players who we will be no longer seeing, most notably to James Lowe. Now, if you've been tuning in the channel for quite some time, you know I'm a huge fan of what James Lowe has done over the recent years with the Chiefs. He's on his way to Leinster following the Chiefs' exit from Super Rugby. a great player, a huge heart on him, and a player that can do things that a man shouldn't be able to do. He's been a great servant for Chiefs Rugby, and it's a shame to see him go. A man I think deserved many times to wear an All Black jumper and hasn't quite made that next level. So it's a huge shame to see him go. James Lowe, go well on Leinster, sir. I'll be watching, see how you get on in the big leagues over in the Northern Hemisphere as well. But aside from that, semi-finals, of course, two very different matches, and it's hard to really compare as to what's going to happen this weekend in the final. You got the Lions, who were lethargic and a bit out of plan in their first half against the Hurricanes. They got a home advantage though, and their second half performance would have done great wonders for them, confidence-wise and game plan-wise as well. They'll have a plan of what they want to do. They'll have an idea of how to shut down the attack of teams. Defense is something that they'll want to keep as tight as possible, and against the Crusaders team, who can control the speed of the game, they can control what happens, the forward pack is going to be instrumental to what any team does here. A lot of talk, like we spoke about, with the guest out in Yankees. Is he a big game player? Is he not? I think the forward pack again is going to determine what he offers. I don't think Richie Mo'unga will be anywhere near as pivotal as the Beauden Barrett's going to be to these sides, which is something we talked about as well. So I don't think the Lions can really focus that rushing defence on one man like they did against the Hurricanes and get away with it. If you're going to pick a favourite for mine, you've got to say Lions. Again, like we seen last weekend, the Crusaders probably are going to go into this as favourites, I'd imagine, given the fact that most people will probably put money on the better odd of the Crusaders before it drops the other way. Can you really pick between them? It's that close, it's that tight. I think the back row battle, like I spoke about as well, is going to be massive. You're going to see the Taufulas, the Todds and the Reeds go up against the likes of the Ackermans, the Quagga Smith. Quagga Smith is just a fantastic player and has really come in leaps and bounds and has to be right in the running for a Springboks jumper, as was spoken about earlier as well. So the back row battle is massive for the sides, and it's just defence. It's just whether the Lions can defend well enough, like we've seen from the Crusaders throughout the season, especially against the Highlanders and the Chiefs in wet weather conditions, and then in just lopsided possession stats. And we've seen the Chiefs had all the ball, all the chance, just couldn't put anything away. Travel will count against the Crusaders, but they know how to do it. So many All Blacks in that team have travelled to South Africa time after time after time. All Blacks, World Cups, they've done it all. So they're a lot more experienced when it comes to adapting to these conditions. More than the Hurricanes, who had a lot of guys in their first couple of years of Super Rugby. So that's something the Crusaders can definitely tip their hat to being a bit more specialised in. It's still going to have a slight effect, but they're on their way there very early in the week, so they should have a lot of time to get used to things. Referee is going to be a huge part. I, for one, as much as it would be good to have a neutral referee, Angus Gardner does not have the temperament to control this match at all. It's got to be someone, I think, if I was going to pick after that semi-final, I would say Glenn Jackson. No question whatsoever about it. Yeah, you could say he's a New Zealand referee, but just the way that match flowed, it was allowed to play. There wasn't any silly cards or silly penalties going around. And you got to say Jaco Piper second off the rank. He was decent enough in that match between the Lions and the Hurricanes. So I think it's going to be one of those two semi-final referees. I just hope it's not going to be Gardner, because last time we seen him, he was dreadful. He was absolutely terrible. So we've got to make sure as a decent ref that doesn't decide the match through his decisions. It's got to be decided through the players on the field. So that is one thing I really, really want to see. When it comes to the end of the day, when all things are said and done, it's time to make the pick. And I'm going with what I went with last week. It's going to be really, really tight. It's going to be really, really close. I'm going Lions by just 2. A couple of reasons why it's good for the competition and it's good for Super Rugby. Having a South African team win it, it's great for them, but it's also refreshing. If New Zealand gets too much dominance here, it could be good. But more than that is the fairy tale finish. It's what dreams are made of, isn't it? What have the Lions done over the last 5 years since the turmoil where the team was kicked out of Super Rugby? They had to have playoffs with the Kings. It was at rock bottom. It really was. And it just continues to explain this whole thing with the Cheetahs and the Kings saying, oh, they're not good enough. I mean, the Rebels, sure, they only won one game this season. But the Lions were just as bad a few years ago. And now look at them. They're competition contenders, finalists 2 years in a row. You cannot kick teams out on form, which is why it is really frustrating to see the Cheetahs and the Kings out of the competition. Now, we can see on this table right here, they're mid-table, the Kings, I mean, 6 wins. They were one of the most entertaining sides in Super Rugby this year. It's a great shame to see them gone. And the Cheetahs, I think they were going to be what the Lions are now in about 3 or 4 years' time. They're going along the same paths, and the Lions, they might not have been here. And I think this is definitely their last chance to win a Super Rugby title. So much changing after the season. Loss of the coach who has guided this whole process from start to finish is massive. When he goes, there will be a bit of way lost. I don't think the Lions are going to go back to being easy beats, but a lot of that structure will break down, and you know, they'll probably go back quarterfinalists. They might hit a semi-final, but the core of the squad will have to stay there. But they're going to lose a lot. They're going to lose a lot of their tactical know-how and just the presence that that coach brings in and what he has brought over the last few seasons. Crusaders definitely capable of winning it. They've got the team, they've got the players, but do they have that little bit extra on the road in South Africa? Definitely a possibility to get the job done. All the players are there, the game plan is there. We've seen Robinson come out and put out the perfect tactics. That first game against the Hurricanes, that was the perfect example of what his tactical knowledge can do. How the teams play and who wins the battle up front is going to be the decisive factor in this grand final. What's your pick? Let me know in the comments below. I'm going Lions by just a whisker once again. I think they're going to get it done. If they can play a full match like they did in their second half against the Hurricanes, they're going to be unbeatable. That was one of the best halves of rugby I've seen by any team throughout the competition this season. Lions to do it. The fairy tale to get the ending it deserves, and to be signed off by Ackman, the end of his story. Lions to do it by 2. It's going to be a great match. I want to know what everyone thinks about the game. Who you think's going to win? Why do you think they're going to win? And everything in between. Make sure to get your picks in for the big match on SuperBru as well, and have that final lunch up the table before Shield wraps up. But that is it for the Super Rugby preview. It's been a great series, bringing it to you guys all season long with some great guests and some great thoughts, and hopefully we can do it all again next season. But until then, thank you for tuning in once again. Thank you all for your thoughts. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in and made picks, joined in with the community spirit, and got involved between the picks and everything in between. And hopefully we can build on this and do some more big things in future as well. So thank you everyone for getting involved, and I'll see you all next time. Until then, enjoy the final and hope your team goes well. Take care.